Greetings and welcome back for yet another edition of Intelligence on Chain, your home for the only crypto analysis worth its weight in Bitcoin. Today we'll be looking at the Router Protocol, a cross-chain messaging protocol using a mesh network architecture to facilitate communication between disparate chains. I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of disparate chains that could use some communication. It's a good thing we have a good team here, so I certainly can depend on my man Kaz to communicate to me whether this is worth our crypto or not. Kaz!
Thank you very much, Nexus, for the fantastic introduction, and thank you very much to everyone that contributed to this one. Mowgli to you, bro. Top work, lads. All right, so Router Protocol. Some of you may have heard the term interoperability. Taking me ages to try and pronounce that correctly. I think I spent most of the time trying to practice that one. And Omnichain, I think the other one is Hyperlane as well. Basically, just marketing terms for linking all the different type of blockchains together to allow different dApps, smart contracts, etc., to just talk to each other. Seems pretty simple, right? If you think of the internet, TCP/IP, loads of different networks and stuff. Now we use it daily as part of our life, part of education. The difference here on the blockchain is you've got different types of what we call virtual machines. So virtual machines are essentially a way of housing all the code, the DNA, the spine for a particular network and allow you to connect up to it and build your dApps and whatnot and communicate to the chain. So
presumably the part that puts the VM in the EVM.
That's the one. I was been paying attention. So with that, we've got EVM, which is an Ethereum virtual machine, and then we've got non-EVM protocols such as, let's have a look. I think Polkadot is one. You've got the Quant network might be one as well. Most of the ones outside of the ones I've mentioned on that. So the question is, does Router Protocol do exactly what it says on the tin? Does it link up non-EVM and EVM? How does it compare to the competition? How much competition is there? What sort of technology are they using? And finish up with what's the scores. All right, so let's have a look at the team first and see what the experience is like.
And the reason why this is important, I'd love to get your feedback here as well. The reason why this is important is because right now, crypto and blockchain is a little bit clunky, right? When you try and use it, it's like not everybody can just go and easily use it. It takes some form of technical know-how to be able to bridge across chains, and pretty damn technical right now. So I think something like this, even in the different formats and the different ways in which we've seen in the past, I think it's going to be important for the future. I think I always like to think that to get to where mass adoption can really take off, it needs to be as simple as posting a picture on Instagram, like using Amazon or something, right? And we're not there today.
What you're saying, you're speaking from an ease of use perspective.
Yeah.
Simplicity.
Yeah. Because it's so hard to go from one chain to another right now, and you run the risk of losing all your funds, and that's what you don't want. So I'm interested to see if this fixes that particular issue.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that as well, there's two sides to it. There's the front end, the customer user experience side. You want it to be easy and simple as you can. I think we're a long way off of that, to be honest. It needs to be a point where we're not even having to load up your MetaMask and stuff. You want to be able to have your Gran Amanda being able to just to simply use it. Once we get to that point, I think it'll be all right. And then the back end, we need to have all the chains talking to each other. So I'll give you an idea of what the landscape looks like a little bit later on.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
I have to save any of my conversation about Cosmos for then too, because that'll probably be a competitive element here.
No, chuck that in, mate. I'm interested to hear about that. So this is one of the four main guys, Chandan Chowdhury. He used to run a company called Bitpolo. He was there for a little bit. He's been in, what else has he done? Bitpolo was a fiat crypto on-ramp company launched in India. Was there just after, it was created before the ban in India, and then when the ban was lifted, it launched. So there was a bit of a strategic element to Bitpolo. And since he's left, he's been at Router for 3 years, hasn't left. There's no sanctions against him as well, which is something we check for, which could be a risky investment because that obviously causes FUD. Mm-hmm. We've also got Praishu Garg as well. So this guy is another genius. He absolutely oozes technical expertise, and he seems to be one of the main brains behind the architecture, behind Router Protocol as well. Can't see that he's worked with. He has. So Diffin, it sounds Welsh, it's not. So Diffin Network, it is also a network that was founded by a guy called Rami. We'll see, look at it a little bit. And the vice president of Diffin is a guy called Suresh, who is also a vice president of, you guessed it, the Router Protocol. So they do have other affiliate companies working with each other, which not to be confused with like a separate partnership. You've also got Rami. So I just mentioned Rami. He's been on a lot of talks actually with Router Protocol and a number of crypto-based news and informational services you can find on YouTube and other places. So as I said, he's one of the founders of Router Labs. He also is a founder of Diffin, which is a cross-chain automatic market maker. He's been in financial services for a large number of time, especially across Europe and Asia. So he's sort of the numbers guy, knows his stuff. And as I said, he's done a lot of talks as well. And then the other co-founder is a guy called Shabam Singh. He's also technical, has a lot of technical expertise, he's a blockchain architect. He's worked with Rami at a couple of places actually as well. So Cume and ZPX. And assuming that Rami has taken him from the time that they've worked together. In terms of business registration, they are registered in a place in Singapore, 160 Robinson's Road. I have checked out on Google Maps. It's an office building. I don't know if it's a virtual office or not. So I did see a few, but not too many other companies that are registered there to make me think it was a virtual office. But they are certainly based in Singapore. I wonder if that might be to do with Rami's previous time that he's worked there, because he's also based or spent a lot of time in Singapore as well.
Just judging by the experience this guy had on the books, I'm thinking that he knew running the operation out of Singapore would be more viable and more inexpensive than trying to deal with the costs of fighting the Indian government.
I think so, mate. I think that is definitely a strategical location there for those guys to be set up. And I think Singapore laws seem to be quite favourable towards crypto as well.
They've always fancied themselves as a hub of international finance, no matter what money you bring.
Yeah, it's a good shout. So yeah, I think that is a very a very astute strategic move there.
Mm-hmm.
So just the overall setup here, I think company-wise, they've gone for Singapore for a very valid reason. Founders, they all seem to have complementary experience, which is good to see. And then below that as well, the team, it's just mainly blockchain engineers, a lot of technical expertise, which is good because this is obviously, a blockchain-based company and you want the right people on board to help produce as many upgrades and updates as you can as best as possible. So all in all, the team looks very good to me. I think it's got a very good overall setup in terms of personnel, structure, and just to give them the best chance of fulfilling their goals. So that's the team. Now the GitHub, this has been done by T-Bro. He's done an absolutely fantastic job on this one. You can see there's 40 repositories altogether, so it's quite a bit. The ones that seem to have the most activity are the top two. So Go is a programming language for those who don't know. And the Router Chain Docs is there to help with developers looking to onboard their projects or protocols. That's just constantly maintained, just to help with essentially like the internal user experience, really. Instead of the customer, it's more like the projects themselves. So if we go to SDK Go, there was, I think, if I remember saying, there was 5 main contributors. The project was created last August. It's had a steady stream of updates since then. Most commits were done in April. There's total 146 tags on the project, which gone through a lot of versions in that time, which is good in a way, but you have to remember if there was any audits, which there has been, the more updates it's been, then the less and less useful that audit becomes. So, but from a technological standpoint, if they are getting through a lot of versions, then that is a very good thing as well, because it shows development activity. And then the Router Chain Docs, as we discussed, that is just mainly there for documentation and helping for new developers get on board. One thing we look at as well is the practices they use. So things like an automated test suite, something you see, not just on chain but off chain as well. And then also things like code review. So that's where someone makes a change and then they send it off to one of the more experienced members of the team who checks it and says, yeah, your code's good, or no, your code's crap, do it again. we can actually see that in there. So it could be one of two things. It could be that they have maybe like a private GitHub somewhere, or for example, they might use third-party service tool like Jira, Azure DevOps, Visual Studios, perhaps via maybe like a third party to do all that, because those do offer things like code reviews, automation and stuff. It's something, it's tools I've used before my career. So that is a possibility, but as this is the only platform we can see, technical platform we can see of all their code and work, we've not been able to see those practices in there like we have seen with other projects. So that's a little bit disappointing if that is the case there. So that was the GitHub side of it. Router chain, I'll just try and go over it from a high level. It's a layer 1 protocol. It says you should be able to offer infrastructure for non-EVM and EVM chains across the blockchain, so allow them to talk. Now, when we say messages, we're not talking about sending a WhatsApp message or a text message. We're talking about messaging in a way to say, here's my current state, here's the new state, or I want to go and get involved in the governance of like another chain, for example, where you're not necessarily sending money over, tokens or NFTs, you're just communicating with another chain for a specific purpose. Now, it uses Cosmos.
Cosmos is absolutely what I sort of expected these guys to be using, because Cosmos bills itself as the cross-chain hub. It is the go-to place for the tools and modules and mechanisms you would want in order to basically coax chains to talk to each other.
Absolutely. In fact, if memory serves me well, I think we reviewed a project a little while ago called Riot, who use Cosmos as well. And they also use the Tendermint kit for consensus, as well as, I think they use Cosmowasm as well, which is the tool for essentially it's a framework for the smart contracts. Allows you to sort of seamlessly just build your dApp, connect up to the consensus. So it is right. It's very flexible. It allows for all things like governance, staking. It uses a proof of stake consensus, which they call Tendermint as well.
It's funny, even Terra Luna Classic uses this mechanism and consensus now, which is something that amuses the hell out of me.
But I think Phantom use an element of the consensus. They use this
Byzantine fault tolerant, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Just on the Tendermint thing, it's we know what happened with Luna Classic, but at least the consensus worked throughout. I don't know, I've not heard of any issues around the consensus itself. Right, so
I actually am bringing that up because Luna Classic, right, was famously the failure of Terraform Labs to run an algorithmic fiat ecosystem. Obviously, that their consensus mechanisms that they had built, Terracoin and the classic coins to run with, that none of that was built to last or to work. By migrating over to Cosmos SDK and Tendermint, obviously you can see that the community would very much like to save that absolute disaster.
But yeah, there's a lot to this. So I'll go into it a little bit more from the technical side in a little bit. But yeah, essentially, Cosmos is popular amongst the ones we've talked about and other protocols as well. So it's a good choice. It's essentially a white label product. So it's sort of ready made. You can integrate it as have Rotor protocol, and it's got elements there for modules and elements for customization as well, which is good for projects and developers that are looking to use it and do their own thing. So if we go to how does it work, there is an absolutely brilliant technical breakdown here of how, this is very recent as well, so it's not as if it was done like 2 years ago and out of date. I think this was done in March this year. It's a very excellent technical breakdown of how each part of this works from bit to bit. So I've just broken it down into, I think, 7 steps. So I'm going to use an example of swapping tokens from Ethereum to AVAX. Example, something that a lot of people are hopefully familiar with. So let's say myself, I interact with an app called Intelligent on-chain swaps, and I want to swap my Ethereum tokens for AVAX. So I initiate it. The interaction, it sends one from the point of me clicking swap, sends data like gas limits, fee payer, address and payload to the bridge info, to the gateway. Now, this isn't anything groundbreaking, just to add. I looked into a few of the other competition, Laser Labs, oh God, what was the other one off the top of my head? I think it might have been Zeta Chain as well. They all do the same thing. This is generic communication.
And
so this
is this their own bridge, or is this like multi-chain or something like that?
No, I think they've got their own bridge.
Okay.
There's more to it. There's like there's an app gateway, there's an application bridge, there's a router. They've got the router chain bridge, I think, as well. So there's a bit to it. And then the gateway then sends these details to orchestras. Orchestras basically, they take the requests and they send them through to the consensus. Once it goes through the consensus and it's validated, there's an application specific bridge. So for this case, you'd have one for Ethereum, you'd also have one for Avalanche. On this side, I think you start off on the Ethereum application bridge. This processes a transaction by deducting a fee, validates the source of the contract based on the destination of the logic, in this case, which would be Avalanche. And then destination modules, they carry out the same validation process from the other steps, and they deduct another fee. Don't worry, you'll get this back later on. Or sorry, the router protocol bridge will get this back later on. The information then goes through the Avalanche consensus, and then it's finally executed at the destination, and it's done with the help of calling the router code. So this sort of facilitates all. And then once that's been finalized on the Avalanche side, it's then broadcast to the validators in Avalanche, and then they will then go about sending information to the router chain in order to refund any excess fees. So there are a lot of different calculations going on between this. Now, it is currently in DevNet. That's the thing as well. It's not actually, there is no mainnet live yet. They've only, as of, I think it was yesterday or the day before, announced a public testnet. It's called Mandana, and that will obviously allow for people like us to get involved as well and help contribute to the technological advancement of their code and their chain. But it's all in DevNet at the moment. So that's just something to keep in mind.
So just to summarize that process then, just to make sure it's sunk in right in my head, it starts the process on Avalanche. In doing so, obviously, it takes a bunch of data, like, in Ethereum. Yeah, we're going off Ethereum onto Avalanche. Thank you. We are starting the transaction. We're grabbing the data that we need. We're grabbing the transaction. Roughly around the same time, it's also kicking off on Avalanche as well. So you're kind of like, you've got two different transactions happening, one on each chain. And then that calling function, I guess, is what binds them together, is it? And then... yeah, I've got to the point where the two different transactions are happening right now. And by the way, I'm not really up on my technical know-how on bridges and things. But what do they do? Do they mint a token on Avalanche and then burn?
I'll be honest with you. It varies from bridge to bridge. Every bridge I've ever used has got a different means by which to materialize the coin you're looking for. A lot of them actually end up sort of acting as spokes in a wheel more than anything. Sort of what bugs me about this whole workflow, though, is that it seems like if we're building on Cosmos SDK, then yeah, they should be able to reduce the fees, because the fees for doing this bridge of specifically Ethereum to AVAX, this would be epic right now. Like the gas for doing this would be insane on both ends.
Yeah, so there's as part of the information that goes across, there is a gas limit. That's a part of the data that's sent from, in our example, from Ethereum over to Avalanche. And then, as I said earlier, like once the transaction's been finalized in Avalanche, that sends the information back to the router bridge, and that will refund any excess fees. So that should hopefully.
Interesting, actually. That's really clever. Yeah, because I there's so many bridges that vary in effectiveness based on various network conditions, blah blah blah, like that I end up using aggregators most of the time to try to figure out what's the most efficient thing for me to do.
So this framework that the router protocol uses, they call it crosstalk.
This will be the proprietary thing that makes them unique right here.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably why they've got a separate private GitHub somewhere or using some other third-party tool for it. It's just they make a big point of saying that it's not just like a bridge or a transfer of tokens or NFTs. Like they make a point about messaging, and to be fair, so do Layer 0 Labs as well. I've looked at. It's all about being able to communicate And being able to bridge and send NFTs and stuff is just a byproduct of that. So you'll see this mentioned quite a lot in their Discord and on their socials about crosstalk. But yeah, it's just another term for them for communicating across the different. If we look at some of their products they've got now, I'm saying earlier, they are on DevNet. So the first one they've got is the swap, which we've just looked at, called Voyager. So it launched in May last year. Allows you to swap assets. Now, for anyone that was keen-eyed, saw me flicking through this, did you see any non-EVM chains on there?
Doesn't look like it.
No,
These all look like EVM or EVM rollup.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're all EVM. They don't have any. They have recently integrated Oasis protocol, so that'd be a new one on there. But I think that's also EVM as well. Now, it doesn't at the moment. It doesn't integrate with non-EVM, so it's not completely interruptible. And that's not dig at Router specifically. And the reason for it is I have not seen any of these interruptible omni-chain type networks and protocols actually do both yet. That is going to be the next thing that really puts one of the chains ahead of the others. So at the moment on this Voyager swaps they've got, it's only for EVMs. And the way they keep, because you're going to need liquidity for this as well, and that's something we see with a lot of bridges, right? You've got lots of different liquidity across different chains, which helps but is also a risk at the same time, because I think bridges, they tend to get hacked a lot more, especially with indexes as well. The liquidity management side of it, what router protocols say they do is they have an internal bridging system away from like the sort of customer protocol end that will regularly swap, manage the liquidity pools on each of the chains that are used, especially in Voyager's case. So it's sort of done like in the back end away from the customer facing side. So that's how they monitor. There's some sort of algorithm which we've not got access to or seen a demo for, but that monitors the level of liquidity and it adjusts it based on volume and things like that. So yeah, that's what they've said. That's how the liquidity management side of it works. They do talk about a widget as a separate product. Well, that widget is actually Voyager. So there is a project called Glitch Finance, which is this little this company here. They have integrated the Router protocol widget. So if I click on this, you see there Voyager, and that's got the logo. It's exactly the same as this one here. So there's a whole list of different projects. Some are live, some aren't, but this is one of the projects that S3 integrated the bridge for Router protocol. And yeah, they've got the same number of chains as well as you'd expect. So that is good. So that's their widget project. Now, idApps, this is new as well. I think this only got announced yesterday.
idApps.
Now, all it is, there's a whole list of here, which, because it was so recent, I've had to take it from the Discord, which I have referenced in here as well. But essentially, this is exactly what Router Chain does. So it's just marketing. The reason why it's come out now is because of the Mandara testnet, which was also announced, I think, yesterday or the day before. So what they're doing is they're saying, hey, we've got this new testnet, come along, build your dApps and stuff. And any dApp that's created on it will be classed as quote idApp unquote. So it's essentially just marketing really, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. What it looks like, it's just essentially this is part of the ecosystem. So everything that's built on it.
What does it say that every single linked app, it could just be the category you have selected, but it looks like everything is digital ID?
Yeah, so here's a category. You can change these here. So you've got some wallets.
Oh, okay. It's not showing us the full drop down. So
okay.
Yeah. So there's lots of different stuff. All right, no problem. No.
Yeah, and to be
made
fair,
me anxious to think it was all digital ID building.
No, to be fair as well, I have checked a handful of these out, and ones I've got no, they'll be nice and say they're not integrated yet, so they're still building in the background. The ones that are live, they do. I've been able to see it like that. That glitch one, for example, is on this list somewhere. So yeah, as far as I can tell, this is accurate. There's 10 pages. If I go to choose category, it just does them all by default. So yeah, it's quite a lot.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they got all sorts of stuff. DeFi, DX, gaming. Yeah.
So most of these, I think the majority of these actually, if not all, are mainly Web3 startups, from what I can tell. The biggest partnership I'll come on to later on, but Yeah, that's a little bit about that. Analytics metrics, as I mentioned earlier, this is it's still in DevNet, very soon to be testnet. There wasn't a lot on the Explorer either that I could actually get in terms of metrics or anything on here. As you can see, it's pretty basic. It's just latest block information, average block time, a little bit of information on the blocks itself. There isn't really a lot on here, so I don't really have much in the form of analytics. I've checked DeFi Llama as well, and there isn't much on there at all. There's nothing insightful I could really give you, unfortunately. But as I said, it's DevNet. It's kind of expected, really. I'm sure once testnet comes out, there'll be some metrics and stuff we can look at a later time just to see how they're progressing. So we did include all the dApps that are built. As far as I can tell, it's accurate. We've just been through that earlier. There's a little summary there. As update, I think. Tokenomics, that's 20 million root. It's about 56.6% circulating supply that's out. There is vested schedule as well, which is here. Just zoom in a little bit so we can have a look. Most of these are time. I think they're all time locked from what Mowgli was saying, which we'll have a look at the scores in a bit. Don't think the team has sold off their portion yet, so that is something to be aware of. But yeah, these are, it's checked with the team and they are time locked. Audits is ancient. In crypto terms, that is ancient. I mean, well, it's ancient anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not even going to waste time looking at that. It's just no point,
Nope.
but it's there for those purposes. Now, there is a multisig as well. And I'm a bit annoyed with this one. I'll come to that in a bit. There's two multisigs, right? There's an Ethereum treasury and there's an Arbitrum treasury as well, which is down here. So I've got, this is the Ethereum one on here. Okay, this has changed quite a bit. It was 1.9 million, just over 1.9 million earlier. And then this is the Arbitrum treasury. That's changed as well, actually. So it's got 2 or 3 multisig, as you can see here. So 2 or 3, that tells you up there. Takes 2 signatures out of 3 to authorize transactions. I have asked the team, who are these people? Haven't had a response back yet. The same 3 people are also on the Arbitrum multisig as well, same wallets. I have checked not only on MetaSleuth, but I've had a scan on the blockchain as well on Ethereum just to see what these guys are up to. Haven't seen anything of concern. They're pretty much linked to every central exchange that I could think of, which is good. So that means they'll be KYC'd somewhere. A little bit. So you've got Binance, Mexcom, I think Qcoin is all somewhere as well. Same for, I think this is a bit, yeah, similar kind of thing. And the Hop is, I think it's that's another interoperable exchange as well. So yeah, I haven't seen anything for any concern at all. So that was good. Now, what's this money used for is the next question. Well, they said it's used for operations and growth. But the thing that I'm a little bit disappointed about is this. So if you're gonna have a multisig and you're saying you use it for operations and growth and you've made it public like they have, there was no announcement for every time there's been a transaction saying what it's for. Now, I know they're not a decentralized autonomous organization, also known as a DAO yet, i.e. so there'd be like some sort of governance vote from investors who could decide on, where the money's spent, etc., that kind of thing. But I just think that especially if you've just got under $2 million sitting in one of these wallets, although I don't have any concerns about, about this Docs team, etc., and just from what I've been seeing on chain, I think it would be better practice if they said, hey, we've decided as a team we're going to spend $300,000 on, I don't know, marketing, or this team here to work on the blockchain infrastructure, something along those lines, and then just reference a transaction in the announcements. Because I've seen projects, with far less structure than this do that. I just think really it should help to explain what the transactions are on there, especially if they're going to transition to a DAO, which they did say they would do. So I was just a little bit disappointed by that. What's your guys' take on that observation? Do you agree with it? Do you think I'm being a bit harsh?
Difficult to say. I mean, if we were talking about a standard technology startup, you tell me, that they've got $2+ million in 2 treasuries basically, and as long as everyone's being transparent about the usage of the operational funding, then it's still a little weird, though. Let's all admit that there's something a little weird about that. I don't know how weird it is, though, in this context.
No, I'm pretty okay with it,
Yeah.
just because it's a proper business and stuff. I mean, it's like if you had a tech startup in Silicon Valley, would you expect them to show all of their transactions? No, you wouldn't, actually, because it's a private
Exactly.
company.
No.
Just because it's on the blockchain, should that be any different? Maybe in some protocols you expect it. In some cases, not. I'm not that bothered, to be honest. Just out of my own opinion.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with that, is that if they're basically running their blockchain project like a traditional tech startup, then by running a public treasury, you do have an extra level of transparency. But in that context, that's what I mean by it's weird, because usually you would rock a Silicon Valley bank account or something like that instead of doing it this way.
I'm of the opinion, if you're, I take everyone's point. I think you've all made great points. I think just for me,
T-Bro makes a
Oh.
point. T-Bro says, my opinion's simpler than all of you. Did they ever promise they would provide such transparency?
oh, don't know. I'll have to look into that a bit deeper. I think from my standpoint, the moment you say we've got a multisig and you put it on all your docs and stuff, and you're moving vast amounts of money around, I'd like to know as an investor what you're going to do with it. Because if I'm trying to gauge, if you say it's for marketing or ops or growth or something like that, and I'm thinking about investing, I want to know that those investments you're making are actually proving to, be worthwhile for the project.
Exactly. And in
that's part of it as
business,
well.
in business, this is where it gets hazy.
Yeah, and if you're not, if I can't tell what you're doing with it, I can't really make that guess or, based off information, decide whether or not you're investing in the right things.
And a lot of companies will want to spend the money now and then have to just it. They are more comfortable justifying the spending later once it's borne fruit. They don't like having to explain every item on the list as they go. It's kind of an extra pain in the neck if you think about it.
Yeah, true. But I think transaction-wise, it's not as if they're doing it every day.
No. And it's just sort of like, they sent something, they sent $50K on May 11th. They're probably spending that on Mark or paying somebody, actually.
Maybe.
But
anyway, I think it's just down to opinions on that. But everyone's made some great points there. So thank you for that, guys. So in terms of testing, so it's something we look at as well. There's a hackathon, I think, every couple of weeks or so. And they post mediums about it. So that's really good to see.
I even saw a Brave ad for a router protocol hackathon once.
Yeah, I have as well, definitely. So yeah, this is really good to see. I'm a big fan of hackathons and just getting people involved to try and break things, because they usually come up with edge cases and new ideas.
Yeah,
and stuff like
I don't want to bust these guys' balls over their transparency when they're running this many hackathons. I think they're doing good.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, we couldn't see much for code reviews and automation, but as I said, I think there might be a private GitHub somewhere, or one of these very common industry standards, Jira, Azure, Visual Studio's, third-party apps. So, in terms of the website, GoDaddy is fine. VirusTotal came back clean, so that was all good as well. And then partnerships and integrations. So there's loads of partnerships. They've got, bloody hell, they've got a whole Discord channel that for the past few days, there's been a new partnership announced. Before that, I think it's pretty much every week or so. I've just written a brief summary about some of them on there. So different network we talked about earlier, it's same company, same but different. But Yazimax, it's cross-chain staking and stuff. That is using it's in the process of using a framework. Derry Trade also uses the Voyager widget. So earlier we looked at Glitch. Derry Trade is another one which I've verified, so they use it. Oasis Protocol, this is a very, very recent partnership. Massive Oasis Protocol. Would love to do a deep dive on them one day. And they will be fully integrated to be one of the other options on, I'm guessing, on something like Voyager. So you can choose that to bridge. Glitch we've seen already. And if you actually look back through the Discord, you can see they've got lots of integrations and partnership that go back to 6th of September 2022. They all pretty much marry up with what we saw on the idApps page. Yeah, they're making good progress in that respect. So that's really good, getting people on board. Competition. So just to give you an idea of the landscape, I mentioned earlier that with Rotor Protocol, they've only got EVM. Well, some of these don't have all the EVMs that Rotor Protocol do. Layer Zero Labs seems to be the most similar to router. They use the same terminology. They're always talking about messaging and stuff as well. It seems to have the same goals. I think it's pretty clear at the moment that there is a bit of a race for interoperability, and this started, I'd probably say maybe about 10 months ago, when I saw a lot of these omni-chain interoperability tweets coming up every now and then. So I think it's going to be interesting between now and say like the end of the year to see if anyone can really get a non-EVM, certainly a few non-EVM and EVM chains talking to each other, because I think that'll really burst this current technology race into life. But at the moment, yeah, no one's really cracked it yet. Even Quant, who people are quite bullish on, from what I can understand, and they've been working closely with certainly the UK government. I don't think they've certainly not managed to crack it either. So yeah, just something to keep an eye out for. So it's fair game at the moment. I think everyone's trying to reach that goal. And from what I've heard from the team, it is really difficult to get. I don't know what you need to do, but it's certainly incredibly difficult from a non-EVM perspective to get that interoperable. In terms of the risks, usual stuff really. Exploits can still happen. Rotor, I know they've got a strong emphasis on security, but it's still not impossible for things to happen, especially when bridges are involved. There's a lot of competition, as I mentioned earlier, so if someone else gets there first, they've essentially pretty much got a step ahead of everyone else, although you probably might see a lot of forks from that. You never know, especially if the code is public anyway.
There are stupid and fee-laden expensive ways to achieve what it is that these guys are trying to do. So if they can do it and basically do it cheaper than everyone else, then there you go.
That's it. But yeah, you want it to be cheap. JP said earlier, you want it to be easy to use. You want it to be fast. Those are going to be the other things that come into it, and but above all, secure. Christ, if you've got something that works, but it's getting hacked every other week, it's not great. And then the other thing as well, as I mentioned, this is still in DevNet at the moment, although we seem to move into testnet. So obviously, things still in an early sort of fetal, I'd say it's beyond fetal at this point, stage of development. There is a high risk of bugs and stuff that could be apparent during use. Yeah, it's just something to be aware of. In terms of scores, I will try and summarize this a little bit. I have seen a couple of proxies. There's a proxy for the root contract on the Polygon chain. There's also part of the Router chain process for onboarding projects and stuff. They use a proxy as well, which I understand from a technical perspective. They need to make updates quickly. It's proxy allowed to do that, but yeah, it's still a risk because, as we said, it can quite easily be turned into an attack contract if even if, say, that became under the control of someone else. This is all innovative. There's a fixed supply, so the usual stuff here. There's no taxes or anything as well. So they scored really well in these areas, as we'd expect for a company like this who deserves genuine utility. So that's good to see. Yes, they've got penetration tested as well via hacker events and the like. So that's also really good to see. Registered business, good. Developer funded via Binance and other exchanges, KuCoin. Because of the GitHub side and the updated audit, we sort of mark 2 out of 3 on that, because taking into account that it's also in DevNet as well. There's no suspicious transactions or anything that I've seen from what I've checked on the blockchain. Good. So it's a new question I've put in. Are there any funds outside of the liquidity pools that are in team control? There is. So there's two multisigs from what we can see. And then there's 2 things. There's a time lock on the sort of team allocated funds. There's also the treasury for ops and growth. It's more risk, but they've got good security on it. So I'm happy with that. There's no suspicious transactions. Well, we don't know exactly who they are, so not that confirmed yet. So we have to award a 0 for that. Same for the composition. Team contract, as far as we know. Public facing owners, so public facing, doxing, that allows for accountability. It's good to see. So top marks on those. I found their social history as well, which is good. So I know they're real people. See if we can find some areas where they've lost some points. So, okay, cool. This is what I was sort of mumbling into earlier. Because they're using a GitHub, which is absolutely fine, and their audit is miles out of date at the moment. So just to be on the safe side, and also with the fact that they're still in DevNet, essentially a testing phase, they get 2 out of 3 for that, for each one of these, to say if there's critical, medium, low severity issues, because there will still be bugs and stuff. Just something to be aware of. And because we couldn't see anything in the GitHub around this sort of these practices, though, you know, I have caveated it earlier, there's no marks for that question. And then they've scored really well in things like phishing alerts and stuff. There's nothing there from VirusTotal. Discord's not audited. They do use it a lot, so I haven't seen anyone score top marks on this yet, but it's definitely a risk to be aware of. There's no custom built wallets for Router itself specifically, so that's not a risk, which is good. And then there's no surprises with any of this. It's not a Ponzi scheme. They've got genuine utility, partly solving the trilemma of what they're doing as well. Very, very scalable, like the max for scalability. They don't have any established businesses in the real world.
Thank you, Cosmos. 90% of what makes this good is the fact that they're building it on Cosmos.
Yeah. That's good. So that's good to see. We've been over how they've been primarily funded. This is the other two questions I've added in the templates as well. So how long has the chain been live for? In this case, it's not applicable because mainnet is not out yet. But there's also this other question, is the blockchain on network in mainnet? It's not, it's in DevNet. So that just carries a risk of at the moment. So that's fair, fairly weighted. Been through this earlier. There's loads of AMAs. Oh my God, these guys are so good with communication. Literally top marks on that. The GitHub and white paper and their docs that we've seen from the repository earlier, really good stuff they put together, so it's fantastic. Mod's generally been good. I think it might be a time zone thing maybe as to why we've not had a couple of questions answered, but it's cool. And then yeah, it all seems good, like nothing wrong with the community at all. Seems to be well on team, and scores on the doors. I think that's a very respectable, especially considering where they are in their development. 77.35%. I think that's a very, very good score, in my opinion. What do you guys think?
I don't disagree at all. I think this is very well deserved. What these guys are doing is definitely something that has a need. Like we have a need in this space. Obviously, they've got some things they're doing that are a little bit outside of the ordinary, but at the same time, what they want to do is a little bit outside the ordinary. So that tracks as far as I'm concerned.